My name's Robert Grimm. People call me Bob. I've been a pilot for about 40 years. I was a corporate pilot for 28 years of that, flying professionally. Before and after that, I've been an airplane mechanic, and that's my current job. Back in the early 80s, I don't remember the exact date, I met up with a gentleman named Glenn Miltenberger, who built the airplane that you see behind me. He started it from scratch. In other words, he went from plans and built an airplane. This was not a kit. This was an airplane. He built every nut and bolt, every weld, every piece of wood, every nail. Everything was constructed by himself. It took him, I'm grabbing numbers here, but I think I'm pretty close. I think it took him about 13 or 14 years to build it. In that time, I watched it the whole way. It was fascinating for me as a young mechanic to watch someone build something like this from scratch. He did a magnificent job. It's a really, really nice airplane. In 1999, Glenn passed away, bout with cancer. It was a terrible thing for all concerned. But the airplane got shuffled into the corner of a machine shed on his farm, where it sat for 13 years. At this point, the family contacted me and asked me if we could place it in the museum up here. And I was pretty enthusiastic about that. I thought that was great. You know, it was languishing where it was at. A far better fate for it would be to be up here where people could see it, touch it, look at it, appreciate the good work that Glenn put into it. I went to the farm fully intending to take it apart and truck it up here. The family would have no part of that. They did not want the airplane disassembled. So I spent about 3 months getting the airplane airworthy again. I did whatever it took to get it to fly again. And the intent was to just fly it up here one time and put it in the museum. But it ended up running and flying so well that the family, Glenn's family, thought it would be wonderful if they could get reacquainted with it. So in the course of the next 2 months, I gave everybody in the family rides. We flew over the farms. We flew over Glenn's resting place. It was a marvelous time. It was a lot of fun. And in the interest of safety and prudence, we decided we better not fly it much more. So that's when we trucked it up here to the museum and put it in the place that it's at. It was a good ride. It was very enjoyable. It was even fun getting it flying again, even though it was quite the task. All the fuel tanks were gummed up, tires were flat, mice had moved in. So you know, it was worth it though, because you know, here it sits where it can be appreciated, and that was my goal. When I was 4 years old, we lived on a farm just north of the Lincoln Airport. And I remember this distinctly. I mean, there's not many things you remember when you're that young, but I distinctly remember airplanes flying over and just, you know, falling for them hard. When I was 5 years old, we moved here to Sioux City, to Sergeant Bluff, actually, which was right across the bridge from the Air Force Base. At that time, it was a hopping Air Force base. The Vietnam War was in full swing. There were fighter jets flying out of here. A lot of people were flying. And I'd pedal my little bicycle over to the airport almost every day. I'm one of those kids that sat at the airport fence and looked in. You know, sadly, I think none of that's going on now. But it was never a question with me what I was going to do. I was going to be in aviation somehow, some way. And this went on. I mean, I went to work over there pumping gas into little airplanes and towing airplanes and washing airplanes, and ended up getting pilot lessons for my high school graduation. And after that, I never looked back. I didn't think I would be good enough to fly for a living. I just wanted to fly for fun. So I ended up going to airplane maintenance school and came back to Sioux City, got a job fixing airplanes, and I was fortunate enough to go to work for a company that needed pilots. And they were willing to train me up to a standard where I could fly big, nice airplanes. And it just kind of progressed from there. It took on a life of its own. I ended up flying things that I never thought I'd get to fly. The last airplane I flew was a complete fly-by-wire $20 million jet. And we flew that all over the continent. And it was a phenomenal ride too. Unfortunately, I had medical problems that prevented me from retiring that way, but boy, I can't complain. Well, I've always been a museum junkie. Everywhere I traveled, and I was very fortunate to be able to travel to some really cool places, and I always looked up the museums, and I always went to the museums, and I always looked around, and there were good ones and there were bad ones. And to my surprise, the Sioux City Museum here, Mid-America Museum, is a gem. It's one of those things that I'm not sure you could duplicate, because the number of artifacts here and the kinds of artifacts that we have are a really good cross-section. I think if the people of the area came here, they would appreciate that. And when you go to a museum, I don't think you completely understand the artifacts to the depth that they could be, because each one of these things has a story. Every one of them has a history. I mean, the Marquart is a case in point. There is a tremendous amount of history in that airplane. You know, you can walk by it and say, wow, what a cool airplane. But if you dive into the nuances of it, that's when it becomes really fun. So I think everybody around here would be pleasantly surprised at what you would find here, because the variety is amazing.